Hello, world history students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for chapter 19, section 3, the Mughal Empire. And we're going to kind of take a look at some things that were happening, obviously, in India. So we're going to start with number one. Muslim rule was first established in India after the fall of the Gupta Empire. The Guptas had brought Buddhism to India and for the most part had a thriving empire kind of at the beginnings of the current era. Um, as Islam established itself kind of off to the west of the subcontinent, eventually Muslim traders are going to arrive in this region. We talked a little bit about Mahmud uh, in our last section of notes and a little bit about Tamerlane. These were men who, for the most part, kind of introduced Islam to this region. And so, by the time we get to about the early AD 700s, Muslim raiders were able to conquer this region. Okay, fast forward past some of those individuals that we've already talked about, we get to about the 1200s. And in the 1200s, we have the Delhi Sultanate that's going to establish itself kind of near what is present day New Delhi. Anyway, this was established, which was obviously from a series of Muslim dynasties that had expanded the Muslim influence into southern India sometime before. So if you take a look map here, you can kind of see how the Mughal Empire kind of was established kind of in the 1500s. And by the time we get into the 1700s, a good portion of what is now present day India has already been kind of conquered by this group of people. Okay, it's going to take a few hundred years, but in time they're able to do that. You get into the southern tip of India and also Sri Lanka. These are areas where you had a very strong hold of Buddhism. And even to this day, there's elements of that that still exist. So, anyway, number three, the empire created by Babar and Akbar, who obviously were relatives, was kind of created at a time when the empire expanded and there was religious tolerance, meaning that it would be possible for Hindus and Muslims to coexist. Anyway, both men were able to develop a strong centralized government. Akbar and Jehangir are related to Babar. Akbar was Babar's grandson, and Jahangir was Babar's great grandson. So Jahangir was a popular ruler because he continued the religious tolerance that, for the most part, is even somewhat relevant to this day. But he also was a man who supported artists and writers. He appointed both Hindu and Muslims to political office. He also adopted some of the influences that were from the West, coming out of Persia, which is like present day Iran. Anyway, he did face a rebellion by a group of people known as the Sikhs. And the Sikhs are a religious minority that lives in India to this day. Sikhism is kind of interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a few moments. So, at the height of the Mughal Empire, we had some different achievements that had been made by the rulers who held power. Who were basically individuals who supported literature and the arts. We also saw the construction of the Taj Mahal and other monuments to the Mughals' greatness, and also the expansion of the empire's borders. When we looked at the map earlier, the Mughals, for the most part, were in the northern part of India, kind of where near New Delhi, and then by the time we get to about the 17th century, they've expanded to southern India. Speaking of the Taj Mahal, I do want to kind of briefly talk about this monument. The Taj Mahal was constructed as a tomb, kind of like a mausoleum. Okay, it's a place where a person is laid to rest. And it was a tomb for a man named Shah Jahan's wife. Shah Jahan was a Muslim, and matter of fact, he practiced polygamy, which is somewhat common in some Muslim cultures, even to this day, where a man could have multiple wives. But uh, this particular wife was probably his favorite, and she died in childbirth at a very young age, and he was distraught. Matter of fact, there's stories about him literally mourning and weeping to the point where it ages him very rapidly. And as a testimony to his love for his wife, he constructed this monument to their love, which is currently the Taj Mahal. So, needless to say, this is one of the more popular uh, historical sites within India. A lot of people go there to see it because of its beauty and its architecture, but it's also got a very strong um, influence when we talk about the Arabic design and looking at the Muslim culture. So, number 8, the expense of the golden age of architecture played a role in the decline of the Mughal Empire for several reasons. One, led to high taxation. And, taxes aren't something that a lot of people are really excited to pay. There was also resentment towards the leaders because they had spent a lot of money and people were getting upset. And then there was also the loss of prosperity within the empire. When people feel like they're not as wealthy as they once were, uh, they get grumpy, and that's not something unique to India and what happened to the Mughals, but it's also something that you can see in a lot of other historical cultures and civilizations as well. Now, we're going to talk about Sikhism. And I mentioned a little bit about that Sikhs, for the most part, kind of had their struggles in India. I first want to mention what Sikhism is. It is kind of a blend of Islam and Hinduism. It's kind of they take kind of the good from each. So, for example, like the Muslims or like Islam, Sikhs, for the most part, believe in only one God. So, they have one almighty creator. God, in their view, created the world, and he has no physical form. So when we think about, maybe God from the idea of maybe the spiritual aspect, that's something that is in line with Sikhism. But Sikhs also incorporate a little bit of the Hindu culture, and so they believe in this concept of reincarnation, this idea that upon death, that you could continue, your soul continues to be reincarnated into a different, like physical form, until it reaches a certain point. One of the most sacred sites for people who are Sikhs is the site of Amritsar, which kind of is known as the Golden Temple. As you can see here, it's not just for lighting effects in this image, but it actually is a building that's gilded or covered in gold. But needless to say, their founder was a guy named Guru Nanak. You might notice that a lot of Sikh men have beards because once they kind of reach maturity, it's kind of seen as kind of a sign of their faith. Also, Sikh men have a tendency to wear a turban. Okay, not all Muslims wear turbans, so to equate somebody who's wearing a turban with somebody who's a Muslim probably isn't the most accurate thing to do. But Sikh men do not cut their hair. And so it's kind of like when you think about the Old Testament, you think about Samson, this whole idea that, his hair kind of gave him his power. But needless to say, men who are Sikhs tend to kind of wrap their hair kind of in a bun, and then they cover it with the turban. So needless to say, that's kind of a unique look upon themselves. There's also a belief that Sikh men also, when they reach of age, get a sword that they carry in their belt as well, which you might still see today at times. So anyway, in number 11, the Mughals were able to influence the cultural development because of their geographic location, trade, the acceptance of foreign cultures and faiths, invasions, and also the assimilation of neighboring peoples. Thank you very much.